The night sky over Earth was calm, peaceful, as if the universe itself had no knowledge of what was about to happen. The moon cast its soft glow over cities bustling with life. People went about their business. Children played in the streets, cars honked in traffic, and millions stared at their screens, oblivious to the horror that was descending upon them. Then, without warning, the stars disappeared. It was subtle at first, a shift so slight that only astronomers and sky watchers noticed it. Then, in the blink of an eye, a massive shadow covered the sky. The air grew heavy, birds screeched and took flight in every direction. Animals growled and whimpered, and electronic signals started to flicker. The internet, cell towers, and satellites all were experiencing unexplained interference. Then came the sound. A deep, resonating hum vibrated through the air, rattling windows and shaking the very ground. People clutched their ears in pain. Dogs barked wildly. Buildings trembled. The world's most powerful governments scrambled to make sense of what was happening. High above the Earth, the XLNary fleet had arrived. Commander Vrokash stood tall on the command deck of his flagship, gazing at the blue and green planet below. He had conquered many worlds, seen civilizations rise and fall under the might of the XLNary Empire. But this world, this fragile little rock, was different. It was loud, chaotic, unpredictable. He had studied its history, its wars, and its leaders. The humans had no discipline, no unity. They were weak, and weak species did not survive the Empire's wrath. Vrokash turned to his officers, his golden eyes glowing under the dim red lights of the warship. "Send the first wave," he commanded. "Burn their skies. Destroy their defenses. Make them beg for mercy before we take what we need." In orbit, hundreds of warships shifted into attack positions. From their underbellies, massive cylindrical objects detached and plunged toward the planet below. At first, they looked like harmless meteors streaking across the atmosphere. Then the first one struck. A blinding explosion ripped through the heart of Washington, D.C., the White House, the Pentagon, the Capitol. All were reduced to molten craters within seconds. Before the world could react, a second impact shattered Beijing, leveling entire districts in a fiery storm. London, Paris, Tokyo, Moscow, the great cities of Earth fell one by one under the relentless bombardment. Firestorms spread through streets, skyscrapers crumbled like sandcastles, and millions were vaporized in an instant. Military bases scrambled to retaliate, but their missiles were swatted away by invisible energy shields. Fighter jets took to the skies, only to be shot down before they could even lock onto a target. The XLNary's technology was beyond anything Earth's forces had ever encountered. But something was wrong. Vrokash expected full-scale retaliation, coordinated resistance. He had read about human resilience, about their tendency to fight even when all seemed lost. And yet, there was no organized counterattack, no global effort to push back the invasion. Only silence, scattered distress signals, and broken transmissions. It was unsettling. On the ground, panic spread faster than the fires. Streets were filled with screams, people running in every direction, searching for shelter, for safety. Parents held their children close, praying for a miracle that would never come. News stations struggled to broadcast, their feeds cutting in and out as the planet's communication network collapsed. In a hidden underground bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Nathan Keller watched the invasion unfold on flickering monitors. His face was grim, his fists clenched. The world's leaders were either dead or missing, and it was clear that Earth's conventional forces were no match for the XLNary. But Keller was not ready to surrender. He turned to his officers, his voice calm but firm. "We're not fighting a conventional war. This isn't about armies and airstrikes. We fight the way humans have always fought against overwhelming odds, through deception, through resilience, through absolute, unrelenting force." He tapped a console, activating secure transmissions to the scattered remnants of Earth's military. Across the world, hidden resistance cells, Black Ops teams, and underground fighters received the message. The enemy thinks we're weak. Let's show them what monsters we can be. Above Earth, on the Excelenary flagship, Vrokash watched the destruction unfold with cold satisfaction. Cities lay in ruin, military forces were decimated, and humanity seemed broken. But he still felt uneasy. Something wasn't right. The streets of Earth were silent. Fires still burned in the ruins of fallen cities, sending thick clouds of smoke into the sky. Ash rained down like snow, coating abandoned cars and shattered buildings. The world had gone quiet, but it was not the stillness of surrender. It was the silence before something worse. Commander Vrokash stood on the bridge of his warship, arms crossed, golden eyes scanning the planet below. The first phase of the invasion had been easy, too easy. His forces had expected resistance, had prepared for the chaos of battle, but Earth's response had been scattered and weak. Their military had been destroyed, their governments had crumbled, and yet something did not feel right. He turned to his second-in-command, a tall, excelenary warrior named Kaltor. Deploy the ground forces. I want occupation squads securing every major city within the hour. The humans are broken. Let's claim what is ours. Kaltor saluted and relayed the orders. Across the planet, excelenary warships descended like dark omens, their sleek black hulls casting shadows over the ruins below. Squads of heavily armed alien soldiers marched through the streets, their rifles humming with lethal energy. They moved in perfect formations, scanning for survivors, searching for any signs of resistance. At first, it seemed like there was nothing left to fight. The humans were gone, either dead or hiding like frightened animals. The streets were deserted, buildings empty, stores looted. Even in the places where heat signatures were detected, no one fought back. The excelenary expected desperation, scattered last stands, civilians throwing themselves at their feet in blind rage. Instead, they found only emptiness. Then the disappearances began. In New York, a patrol squad of 6 entered an abandoned subway tunnel to investigate strange noises. Their communication feed cut out. When backup arrived, they found only rifles and helmets left behind. No blood, no bodies. In London, a scouting unit stationed in a ruined skyscraper reported movement in the shadows. Their commander ordered a sweep of the building. Minutes later, the squad stopped responding. A search team was sent to find them. They never came back. In Moscow, an armored transport carrying excelenary officers vanished while crossing a bridge. Security drones found the vehicle overturned, its doors ripped open, its passengers missing. The onboard cameras only recorded a flicker of movement before going dark. Panic began to spread through the lower ranks. Excelenary soldiers were trained for direct combat, for wars fought with superior firepower and tactics. But this was different. There were no battle lines, no enemy formations to fight. It was as if the humans had become ghosts, striking from the darkness and vanishing before anyone could react. Vrokash watched the reports pile up. His warriors were the finest in the galaxy, equipped with the most advanced technology known to their kind. And yet, one by one, they were disappearing. Kaltor clenched his fists. These are just isolated incidents. The humans are weak, primitive. Whatever tricks they are using, we will crush them. Vrokash wasn't convinced. Weak prey does not hunt its predator. We need answers. Bring me a prisoner. In the heart of what was once Los Angeles, a squad of excelenary soldiers stormed a ruined apartment complex. They moved cautiously, their rifles raised, their thermal scanners sweeping every shadow. They had orders to capture a human alive. They never made it out. Minutes later, their commander's helmet camera transmitted a final chilling image to the excelenary command network, a dark figure emerging from the smoke, its face hidden beneath a cracked military helmet, its eyes burning with fury. Then, static. Vrokash watched the footage on a loop. The last second before the feed cut out showed something that made his blood run cold. The figure wasn't afraid. It wasn't running. It was charging straight at them. The humans weren't hiding. They were hunting. That night, a new message echoed across the extraordinary communication channels. A transmission, broadcasted from an unknown location. It was in English, rough and filled with static, but the words were clear. You think we're weak. You think this world belongs to you. You are wrong. A deep silence filled the war room. The extraordinary officers shifted uncomfortably. Vrokash exhaled slowly. This was no longer an invasion. This was something else. Something far more dangerous. The ghosts of war had risen, and they were coming for them. The extraordinary forces had fought many wars. They had crushed civilizations, wiped out entire species, and brought countless planets to their knees. They had always been superior, stronger, faster, more advanced. But here, on Earth, something was different. Something was wrong. The enemy refused to fight them directly. They did not line up in formations, did not send fleets to challenge them in open battle. Instead, they lurked in the ruins, hiding in the shadows, waiting. And when they struck, it was sudden, brutal, and efficient. Vrokash stood in the center of the command room, watching live feeds from across the planet. His soldiers were nervous, their discipline faltering. He could hear it in their voices, see it in their movements. They moved in tighter formations, checked corners obsessively, jumped at the smallest sounds. Fear was creeping into them, and fear was dangerous. A transmission came in from one of the forward bases in Berlin. A squad of elite Selnary warriors had gone in to secure an old human military bunker. They had sent in drones first. Protocol demanded it, but the drones malfunctioned the moment they entered. Interference, they thought. A minor issue. They went in anyway. The last message from the squad was a panicked voice screaming, "It's a trap. They're everywhere." Then silence. Vrokash rewound the footage, analyzing the last few seconds. The squad had moved in cautiously, weapons ready. Then, one by one, they had vanished. Not shot, not killed in open battle, just gone. The final frames showed dark shapes moving in the smoke, attacking without hesitation. The extraordinary never stood a chance. In the heart of Paris, another patrol was on edge. The streets were silent, empty. The buildings loomed like grave markers, their shattered windows staring like empty eye sockets. The soldiers advanced carefully, their scanners sweeping for life signs. Then they saw it. A extraordinary soldier, impaled on a metal rod, arms stretched wide like a broken puppet. Carved into his armor, in the rough, jagged script of human writing, were the words, "You are not welcome here." One soldier took a step back, muttering a curse in his native tongue. Another checked his rifle, adjusting his grip. Their leader, a hardened warrior with years of experience, took a deep breath and motioned for them to move. They needed to stay focused. They needed to. A sharp whistle cut through the air. It was an old human trick, something primitive, something simple. But it was enough. The extraordinary spun around, weapons raised. The shadows shifted. Movement flickered in the smoke. Then the attack came. Bullets and blades, explosions and screams. The extraordinary fired wildly, but their enemy was already among them. They fought back, but it was no use. The humans moved too fast, struck too hard. One by one, the squad was wiped out. Back on the flagship, Vrokash clenched his fists. This was not how war was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to break. They were supposed to surrender. Instead, they were fighting like cornered beasts, and worse, they were winning. Reports flooded in. Patrols missing. Bases wiped out overnight. Zelnary officers found dead, their bodies arranged in eerie displays, warnings carved into their armor. The humans had turned the planet into a battlefield of nightmares. Keltor slammed his fist on the table. "They're playing games with us." He growled. "Enough of this. We need full-scale retaliation. Burn every ruin, every tunnel. Flush them out. Vrokash said nothing for a long moment. He knew brute force would not work. This was not a war of strength anymore. This was a war of fear. And for the first time in his life, he was on the losing side of it. He turned to his officers, his voice low and cold. Increase security. Reinforce every occupied sector. And find me a survivor. I need to know what we're dealing with. But deep down, he already knew the truth. The humans were not just fighting back. They were hunting them. The Excelinary had underestimated them. They had believed humanity was weak, that Earth would be another easy conquest, another world to add to their empire. But now, their forces were scattered, their soldiers afraid to patrol alone, and their officers hesitated before giving orders. The humans were not just fighting back, they were making the invaders bleed. Vrokash stood in his command center, his golden eyes locked onto the latest battlefield reports. Cities that should have been fully secured were now war zones. Supply lines were being severed. Entire squads of Selnary warriors were vanishing, leaving only blood-streaked walls and eerie silence. This was not normal warfare. This was something else, something primal, something terrifying. Then, the emergency signal came in. An outpost in what remained of Tokyo was under attack. Zelnary reinforcements had been sent, but they had gone silent within minutes. A live feed from a battle drone was still active, broadcasting shaky footage from above the ruined city. Vrokash leaned in, watching carefully. The outpost was burning. The defensive turrets had been destroyed, their metal husks still smoking. Bodies of Selnary warriors were scattered across the streets, their armor torn apart, their weapons untouched beside them. The humans didn't take their guns. They didn't need them. Then movement. The drone's camera panned, tracking a group of human fighters emerging from the wreckage. They moved like shadows, quick and precise. Their armor was a mix of scavenged Excelinary plating and old Earth military gear. Their weapons were brutal, makeshift blades, modified rifles, even tools turned into instruments of death. But what caught Vrokash's attention was their eyes. They were filled with something he had only seen in the most ruthless of Excelinary warlords. Pure, unrelenting rage. The feed flickered as the drone attempted to zoom in. One of the humans, a towering figure with a shattered helmet and a bloodied knife, turned toward the camera. For a moment, the image was clear. Then the human raised his weapon, and threw it. A metal rod shot through the air, striking the drone dead center. The screen went black. Vrokash exhaled slowly. He had seen enough. Keltor slammed his fist on the table. They fight like beasts. No discipline, no strategy. Just mindless violence. Vrokash shook his head. No, he muttered. Not mindless. He turned to his officers, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. This is not random. They are not attacking at will. They are picking their battles, choosing where to strike. They are testing us. Silence fell over the room. The realization settled in. The humans were learning. The next night, another attack came. This time, it was a fully fortified Excelinary base near Moscow. The outpost was protected by energy shields, motion sensors, and heavy weaponry. It should have been impenetrable. And yet, the humans still got in. They came in the dead of night, moving through the ruins like ghosts. The Excelinary guards barely had time to react before the alarms began blaring. Explosions ripped through the base, shattering walls and tearing apart defenses. The humans swarmed in, striking fast and brutal. A Excelinary warrior, a veteran of a dozen wars, raised his rifle and fired. His plasma shots hit nothing but air. Before he could react, a human soldier was already on him, a jagged blade slicing through his throat. The Excelinary tried to regroup, but the humans didn't fight fair. They used their environment, set traps, ambushed from the shadows. A squad attempting to retreat found themselves funneled into a collapsed building. only to be buried alive when the humans detonated explosives hidden in the rubble. Vrokash watched from orbit as the reports poured in. The losses were staggering. The Excelinary had the technology, the numbers, the firepower, but the humans had something far more dangerous. They had nothing to lose. The battle dragged on for hours, but by dawn, the Excelinary base was gone, not just destroyed, erased. The survivors who made it out spoke in hushed voices, their eyes filled with something Vrokash had never seen in his warriors before: dread. One soldier, barely alive, was found wandering through the ruins. When questioned, all he could whisper was, "They don't stop. They don't sleep. They enjoy this." The war was changing. The humans had become something else. They had become monsters. The Excelinary invasion had started with overwhelming force. Their warships had darkened the skies, their armies had marched through cities, and their weapons had burned through Earth's defenses like paper. They had expected victory. They had expected obedience. They had been wrong. Now their mighty forces were crumbling. The humans had turned Earth into a nightmare battlefield. The invaders had gone from conquerors to prey. Their patrols hunted, their bases destroyed, their soldiers filled with fear. And now, the humans were preparing for their final strike, the blow that would decide the fate of the war. Vrokash knew this moment was coming. He had underestimated them for too long. He had watched as his warriors vanished, as his fleets lost contact, as the enemy adapted and learned. He had tried to contain them, to crush their resistance, but nothing worked. The humans were no longer just defending. They were winning. A distress call came from one of the last major Excelinary strongholds on Earth, a massive command center in what was once Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be the heart of the occupation, a fortress of impenetrable walls, elite soldiers, and heavy defenses. But now it was under attack. The first explosions rocked the outer perimeter just before dawn. The humans had spent weeks preparing, studying the base, mapping out its weak points. They knew where the security systems were, how the defenses operated, and where the Excelinary were most vulnerable. And then they struck. The power grid went down first. The lights flickered, then died. The energy shields collapsed, leaving the walls exposed. Communication signals were jammed, cutting the Excelinary off from reinforcements. Then came the real attack. From the ruins, the humans emerged. Hundreds of them. Warriors in scavenged armor, their weapons a mix of stolen alien tech and old Earth firepower. They fought like demons, moving fast, hitting hard. Excelinary soldiers rushed to their positions, trying to mount a defense. Plasma fire lit up the battlefield. The humans should have been torn apart in the open, but they weren't. They weaved through the chaos, using the rubble for cover. Snipers picked off Excelinary commanders from the rooftops. Fighters armed with stolen cloaking devices slipped past defenses, cutting through enemy lines before vanishing into the smoke. Traps detonated in key locations, creating more chaos, more confusion. The Excelinary had never faced an enemy like this before. Inside the base, Kaltor roared in frustration. Push them back. Hold the gates. But it was no use. A massive explosion tore through the western wall, sending debris flying. A squad of human fighters stormed through the breach, cutting down Excelinary warriors in brutal close-quarters combat. One Excelinary officer managed to activate an emergency beacon, calling for reinforcements from orbit. A fleet of warships, still hovering above Earth, received the distress signal. They prepared to send dropships, to crush the human resistance once and for all. But then, another explosion. And this time, it wasn't on the ground. It was in space. Human saboteurs had infiltrated one of the Excelinary's main command ships. They had used captured technology, disguising themselves as prisoners to get on board. Once inside, they had set the ship's core to overload. The resulting explosion was massive, taking out 3 warships in the blast and sending the rest into chaos. Without leadership, without coordination, The Excelenary fleet was vulnerable, and the humans took full advantage of it. Back on the ground, the battle inside the stronghold was reaching its peak. Vrokash watched the fight unfold from the command room, his expression unreadable. His best warriors were falling. His strongest defenses were failing. He had spent his life fighting wars, but he had never seen an enemy like this. A voice crackled through the base's speakers. It was a human transmission. Rough, filled with static, but clear. "You came here thinking we would kneel. You thought we would break. But this is our world. And you are nothing but invaders." Vrokash clenched his jaw. He knew what was about to happen. The humans stormed the command center. The last of his guards fell in brutal combat. And then the doors burst open. A group of human warriors stepped inside. Their leader, a battle-scarred man with burning eyes, raised his rifle. Vrokash stood tall, staring at his enemy. He had misjudged them from the start. The humans were not weak. They were monsters, and they had just won the war. The war was over. The once mighty Excelenary had fallen. Their warships, which once darkened Earth's skies, were now burning wrecks in orbit. Their bases, once symbols of dominance, were nothing but rubble. Their soldiers, once feared conquerors, were either dead, captured, or fleeing into the void of space. Earth had won. The final battle had been brutal. The humans had fought like demons, pushing through every line of defense, tearing through the enemy with an unrelenting fury. The Excelenary had tried to regroup, to fight back, but it was too late. Their army had been broken. Their leaders had been hunted down. Their greatest commanders, including Vrokash, had either fallen or surrendered. Now silence filled the ruined cities. Fires still burned in the distance. The air smelled of smoke, blood, and victory. A human soldier, his armor covered in dust and scars, stood atop a fallen Excelenary war machine. He looked up at the sky, watching the last of the enemy ships vanish into the darkness. They were retreating, running. They wouldn't be back. Not today. The resistance fighters gathered in the ruins, battered but standing. Some cheered. Some simply collapsed from exhaustion. Others stared in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. They had survived. For the first time in months, Earth belonged to humanity again. But the war had come at a cost. Cities were gone. Entire nations had been wiped off the map. Millions were dead. Families torn apart. And those who had fought, those who had killed, those who had lost everything, they were no longer the same. They had become something else, something the universe would never forget. In the days that followed, the survivors began to rebuild. Messages were sent across the planet, calling for anyone still alive to come out of hiding. Old governments, shattered and broken, tried to reform. Leaders emerged from the ashes, trying to bring some order to a world that had been nearly lost. But one truth became clear. The humans would never be the same again. They had learned what it meant to be hunted, to be outnumbered, to fight against impossible odds. They had learned to be ruthless, to adapt, to strike without mercy. And they had won. The universe had always seen humanity as a primitive species, a young race still playing with fire. But now, the Excelenary knew the truth. And soon, the rest of the galaxy would know it too. Far beyond Earth, in the depths of space, the surviving Excelenary ships regrouped. Their numbers were a fraction of what they had once been. Their pride had been shattered. Their leader, Kaltor, stood on the bridge of the last remaining dreadnought, his face twisted in rage. He had never known defeat like this. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be easy prey. And yet, they had turned into monsters. Killers. Survivors. Kaltor clenched his fists. This wasn't over. The Excelenary Empire was vast. Their armies were endless. They would return, stronger, prepared, with new weapons and greater numbers. They would wipe out humanity, erase them from history. But deep inside, a shadow of doubt crept into his mind. Because now he knew the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species to conquer. They were something far more dangerous. And the next time the XL Neri came back, the humans would be waiting.